Hello everyone, and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Steffy Forrester walked off the private flight onto the tarmac at LAX, the California sun fiercely glaring down on her fancy sunglasses and windswept blonde hair. She was alone. There was no small bundle in her arms, no cooing baby haze to take her mind off the hollow aching in her chest. The chauffeur waited in his beautiful black SUV, but Steffy waved him off, slinging her overnight bag over her shoulder and hailing a cab instead. She wanted the anonymity and grind of daily traffic to reflect the disorder in her soul. Los Angeles welcomed her back with a gleaming exterior, but she was shattered on the inside. It all began in Monte Carlo, a disastrous family vacation intended to heal old wounds. Ridge, her father, pushed on it. Sun-kissed beaches, yacht parties, and a chance to reconnect after the never-ending drama with Brooke and Taylor. Steffy had brought Hayes, her adorable son, barely a toddler with plump cheeks and an irresistible giggle that could melt even the coldest heart. Finn was due to join them later, but he was scheduled to have surgery at the hospital, so he offered to fly in for the weekend instead. "I'll be there, Steffy," he replied over the phone, his voice soft and soothing. "Nothing's keeping me away from you and Hayes," he said, although everything had. Or so it appeared. The tragedy occurred on a winding seaside road that hugged the cliffs overlooking the Mediterranean's azure depths. Steffy had taken Hayes for a drive in the rented convertible, top down, the wind blowing over their hair as they sang foolish songs. She was laughing, finally free of the Logan Forrester feud that had afflicted her family. That's when the vehicle appeared out of nowhere. A delivery van swerving around a steep curve, brakes shrieking like a banshee's wail. Steffy wrenched the wheel, tires screeching against the pavement, but physics was cruel. The car whirled, rolled, and crashed into the stony coastline below. Amazingly, Steffy survived. She had bruised ribs, a gash on her forehead that needed stitches, and a concussion that kept her world spinning for days. But Hayes, her baby Hayes, he was gone. His small body was pinned amid the wreckage, shattered beyond repair. Rescuers extracted her first, then worked frantically on him, but the paramedics' expressions told the story before words could. "I'm so sorry," one muttered, as helicopters whirred overhead and sirens rang out. Steffy screamed till her voice gave out, clutching at the medics and refusing to let go of his lifeless body.
"No. Hayes.
My baby." The days faded into a nightmare. Hospitalization in France followed by a return to the United States for Hayes' funeral. Finn arrived too late, his trip delayed by a storm, to find his wife catatonic in a sterile room, rocking an empty bassinet. He grabbed her, but she pulled him away, her eyes lifeless, murmuring, "You weren't there. You promised." The blame festered like an open wound. Finn, the golden boy doctor, had made too many decisions that prioritized job before family. Steffy couldn't forgive him. She couldn't look at him without picturing Hayes' empty crib. Back in Los Angeles, the Forrester estate looked like a tomb. Steffy slipped in through the back entrance, avoiding the staff's pitying looks. Ridge discovered her in the nursery, surrounded by Hayes' toys, Hope's teddy elephant, Liam's rattle, and the small sneakers she had purchased just a week before. "Steffy, honey," Ridge whispered, his voice shaking as he embraced her. "You're home. We're all here for you." But home seemed like a jail. Taylor, her mother, lingered like a ghost, recommending bereavement counseling and sedatives. "You need to heal, darling," Taylor insisted, her psychiatrist's serenity hiding her own anguish. Steffy nodded mechanically, but inwardly, she was boiling with wrath. Why Hayes? Why not her? The guilt was a constant companion, whispering that she should have driven more slowly, taken a safer route, and kept the top up. Nightmares vividly recreated the incident, including the crush of metal and Hayes' dying yell, which was cut short. Finn tried everything. Flowers withered on the bedside, and love messages were crumpled in the garbage. He prepared her favorite supper, spaghetti primavera with fresh basil, but she was unable to eat. "Steffy, please," he pleaded one evening, kneeling behind her chair in the dimly lighted living room. Talk to me. Yell at me, hit me, anything. We lost him together. She glanced at him, her eyes red with sorrow. Together? You were in LA, saving strangers, while I buried our son. How do we together that, Finn? The family divisions widened. Brooke, ever the outsider in Steffy's eyes, expressed her sympathies with that syrupy concern. If there's anything I can do. But Steffy saw red. Brooke's history of driving families apart, her insatiable need for rich. Stay away from us, Steffy growled during a heated meeting at the Forrester offices. Hope, feeling the storm, attempted to bridge the divide by sharing stories of her own losses with Beth. Even Hope's empathy couldn't penetrate Steffy's armor. Nights were the worst. Steffy, alone in the king-sized bed, grabbed Hayes' blanket, smelling the faint scent of baby powder that remained like a cruel prank. Hayes' first steps in the Malibu beach house, his laughter ringing down the corridors during Thanksgiving with the Forresters, all brought back memories for her. She had been so proud, uploading fuzzy videos on social media with the description, "My Little Prince." Now, those images taunted her, with likes and hearts from strangers who had no idea about the void. Work became her escape, or at least an effort at it. Steffy immersed herself in Forrester Creations designs, creating powerful, angular costumes that exuded agony and resilience. Eric noticed and pulled her aside. Take your time, Steffy. The company can wait. But waiting meant facing the void. During a board meeting, she shouted at Liam about a minor shipment delay. Do you think Hayes cares about deadlines? He's dead. The room went silent, and Liam's cheeks paled as he stuttered an apology. Finn's anguish matched hers, albeit in quieter ways. He drowned in work at the hospital, working double shifts to avoid his home. Sheila Carter, the venomous shadow from his past, reappeared in their lives, providing twisted solace. I know loss, Finn, she'd remark, her eyes shining with fake sympathy. Steffy became enraged when she discovered them conversing in the hospital corridor. Get out. You're poison. Sheila smirked and fled, but the germ of mistrust grew. Had Finn confided in her? Was he looking for solace elsewhere? Weeks stretched into months. Steffy frequented Los Angeles' underworld, seeking solace in dive bars and anonymous couplings that made her feel dirty. One stormy night, she ended up in a filthy motel, staring at the ceiling while thunder roared. A stranger's touch could not fill the hole. Instead, it deepened it. She drove to the mental equivalent of the crash site, the Santa Monica Cliffs, and stood at the edge, wind howling, seduced by the drop. Hayes, wait for Mommy, she said into the void. Ridge stepped in, conducting a family intervention at the cabin in Big Bear. Taylor, Brooke, grudgingly, Hope, Liam, and Deacon all turned up. We love you, Steffy, Ridge implored. Hayes wouldn't want this. She chuckled cruelly. Hayes is gone because of me. Therapy sessions ensued, revealing layers of remorse, resentment, and unresolved Forrester rivalries. Slowly, fractures developed throughout her fortification. Sharing stories about Hayes elicited hesitant smiles, his love of peekaboo and his fascination with blocks. Finn never gave up. He transformed the nursery into a memorial chamber, complete with photo walls and a sign stating, "Forever our light." Steffy discovered him there one morning, tears flowing down her cheeks. I failed you both, he said. She slipped next him, placing her hand on his. We failed him. For the first time, they grieved together, not separately. Healing was not linear, but rather jagged. Steffy returned to Monte Carlo and her nightmares, but Hayes waved from the cliffs, safe and happy. She turned her grief into advocacy, establishing a charity for child road safety and fighting for stronger barriers and increased awareness. Forrester Creations developed a line inspired by Hayes, soft blues and whites, with earnings benefiting the cause. However, the melancholy stayed as a faint undercurrent. Steffy stood by Hayes' grave at sunset, wildflowers in hand. Finn joined her, arm around her waist, saying, I miss you every breath, baby. They were not complete, but they were putting pieces together. LA's lights twinkled below, unconcerned with personal tragedies, but Steffy found refuge in the stars, Hayes looking over. In the end, Steffy's homecoming signaled not the end, but rather a single journey through darkness toward frail light. The bold and the beautiful world continued to spin, but her heart wore the lifelong scar of grief. She got off the plane into the low hum of Los Angeles night, the city lights flickering like broken promises on the horizon. Her suitcase slid after her, its wheels gently skimming across the terminal floor. Alone. But one terrible question rang in her mind, making her fingers tremble. Where is he now? She had left behind a tempest of sirens, twisted metal, and the bitter tang of terror in her throat, and now she returned to the familiar, but strangely foreign, landscape of streets and shadows, bearing the weight of everything she had lost. Steffy had returned home to a place marked by loss. She'd tried to convince herself she was prepared. After all, she'd heard whispered reports of a terrible wreck, an ambulance, and a hospital. But rumor is a harsh storyteller, and nothing could have prepared her heart for the emptiness that greeted her upon landing. She closed her eyes and remembered the moment she realized something had gone terribly wrong. She was so confident that she could protect him, that no harm would ever come to her son. However, life, as it frequently does, demonstrated how fragile her assurance was. It happened in between texts, a telephone call in the dark. Someone else's voice was trembling. Then the crash. Then came quiet. Hayes was nowhere to be found as she emerged from the frenzy, as the lights and horns faded and the crowd dimmed. She strolled through the airport's halls, her heart thumping with each footstep and the echo of her own breath. She felt she had rehearsed this reunion 100 times. She would hug him, look into his eyes, and tell him she was present. But suddenly the reunion she desired lacked warmth. There was no him. Outside, a cab stand waited. She slid into the rear seat and gave the address to her home, without looking up. The motorist looked in the mirror and saw a stranger looking back at her.
He did not ask.
He did not press. In mute civility, he allowed her to carry her pain. She peered at the passing city lights, each brilliant rectangle representing a memory she could no longer touch. The once familiar Los Angeles skyline seems distant and disinterested. She felt like a ghost wandering through a universe that once included him. When she arrived, the home was silent. The lights in the living room dim, the seats remain undisturbed, and the silence grows. She halted in the doorway, bags by her side, her eyes adapting to the darkness. Everything smelt the same, the perfume of furniture, of home, but nothing felt like home anymore. She sank into the couch, allowing the weight of her body to crush into the cushions. Minutes stretched out, empty and dragging. Each sound, the subtle hum of the air conditioner, the soft creak in the floorboards, made her nervous. She stared at the phone in her hand, hoping it would ring. I wish it was his name on the screen. She remembered his bright and genuine laugh, small hands reaching for hers, and bedtime whispers spoken in the dark. She recalled all the mornings when she had awoken to him sleeping by her side, innocent in dreams. Will she ever hear his voice again? Will she ever see the half-smile that always welcomed her? She focused her attention back on what she knew. Hayes had been in the car with her. Something happened. She hadn't located him. Nobody had told her he was dead, and no one had told her he was alive. The night deepened. She finally stood and walked through the home, into his bedroom, which was still untouched, with toys on the shelf and drawings tacked to the wall. She touched the edge of his bed, closed her eyes, and put her fingers against the linen. It felt hollow. She muttered into the darkness, "Where are you, my love? Please come home to me." She returned to the living room and sat down, resigned to waiting. She could not imagine the hospital, the machines, or the tubes. She refused to think about saying goodbye. Sleep came in shards of a dream. Dark roads, a petite figure sleeping still with her arms extended. She awoke gasping, tears streaming down her face, her pulse throbbing as if he were still present, and then the emptiness returned. Morning light filtered through the drapes, and the world stirred. Phones vibrated. Messages arrived. People called. Friends expressed their sympathies, asked inquiries, and provided strength. Their words flowed over her like rain, but none reached the place inside called Hayes. She said that someone will check at it. She hoped for news. She bowed and muttered, "Thank you," despite her scratchy throat. She swallowed her anguish. She waited. Finally, the doorbell rang. She stood there terrified and opened it. Ridge, her father, stood there with concern in his eyes. He entered silently and pressed his arms around her. However, she felt hollow where his arms touched her. She leaned into him, taking comfort in the pressure of his grip. He did not speak. He just let her lead him through the house, showing him the spare room, toy lines, and the blank wall where his drawing should be. He placed a palm on her heart, and she felt a tremble in her chest, grief oozing into ancient crevices. She pushed ahead day after day, each step heavier than the last. The hospital provided no clear explanations. They did tests, performed imaging, and sent reports in drips. Each report contained gaps. Vital signs remained steady. A coma? Brain injury? No, they couldn't say anything definitive yet. Uncertainty was a pain. She sat in the waiting room. She nervously cleaned her nails, picked at the linoleum floor, and watched the nurses walk by. Every voice and every footstep resonated. She glanced at the clock, counting seconds, minutes, and hours. She counted each breath she took. She left a backpack nearby with fresh clothing and his favorite blanket in case he returned. She would occasionally visit him, place her hand near him, whisper stories, and read him books. She hoped he could hear. She hoped he remembered. She told him she loved him and that she was waiting. She informed him that she believed in him, that if he could return, she would be here. She pledged never to abandon him again. At home, the nights were endless. Sleep refused to arrive. Grief sat by her, whispering things she didn't want to hear, such as the possibility that he may never wake up. Perhaps she'd return alone. Perhaps she'd lost him. She stared at his empty seat at the dinner table, his plate untouched, and his cup still in place. She lifted it from the table, removing each evidence of his absence one by one, as if she could close the distance with her will. However, you cannot erase absence. It lingers like a shadow, regardless of how hard the light presses. She repeated the last things she remembered. The crash, the screech of tires, and the fight to breathe. She retreated from the recollections, but they gnawed at her mind. She attempted to stitch them together, but the parts refused. Some fragments had vanished, consumed by smoke, metal, and dread. She wanted to go back and fix it, to turn left, slow down, and protect him with her body. But this is not how fate works. It does not allow reruns. It establishes consequences. Weeks have passed. She was still returning to the house alone. She still packed her suitcase when she planned to go for the hospital at night. She still awoke in the dark, believing she needed to check on him. Friends stopped by. They delivered food, words, and Kleenex. They attempted to get her to chuckle. They told her to rest and take care of herself. But she felt she had no right to relax or leave the vigil. Because what if he awoke and she wasn't present? She watched the sun rise and set through windows that enclosed the still heavens. She felt the weight of the world press against her, on her throat, her chest, and the void inside her chest where his heartbeat formerly resided. She addressed him as if he were only in the room next door. She would say, "I am here, my love. I will never leave you. Come back to me." She hoped that somewhere, the soul she knew, the child she bore, could hear her, feel her presence, and gain strength. And yet, she strolled those corridors alone. She kept his memories like a delicate glass, holding it to keep it from shattering. She opened the doors, expecting him to laugh. She filled rooms with rehearsed anecdotes about his boyhood, including the first time he walked, the sound of his chuckle, and the warmth of his little hand in her own. She felt both hollow and complete at once. She felt shattered but managed to keep it together. She had both fear and hope. One day, the telephone rang. She held her breath. She jumped. She answered. But that wasn't him. It was news. The tests came back. She discovered that hope was a fleeting possibility. However, they are delicate. uncertain, a tightrope strung above the abyss. She collapsed on her knees.
Tears poured.
She laid her head on the cool tile floor and shouted into the void, allowing grief to flood out until her voice cracked and she was left with nothing. Then she rose again. She wiped her face. She smoothed her dress. She took her purse. I walked into the hospital. She walked inside the room where his body was still. She approached him, little, pallid, and lovely, and she placed her hand on his. She muttered again, "I'm here. I'll wait. I will always be back. I love you." She returned to the house alone, her footsteps echoing. Room by room, she discovered evidence of him. The crayon sketch on the refrigerator. The plush toy remained on the floor. There is an open book on the shelf. She caressed each and muttered his name. She let her memory support her. She wasn't sure if she'd ever carry him again, warm in her arms. She wasn't sure if he'd wake up or remember her. She didn't know how to live in an uncertain environment, but she knew she would try. She would fight. She would cling on to love as long as she lived. So she waited, in silence, in heartbreak, I hope, alone. But he was always with her, in her heart, in her memory, and in the void that no absence could ever erase.